Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Rainer, CTO of Broadcast Solutions, and I have the privilege to introduce to the next panel. And this panel, it's a blast, a colorful blast. We have the big players of the industry on the playground. Sometimes these big boys try to steal my favorite toy, the OB van, but they don't manage. But we will hear more from them, and let me introduce you. On the left side, in the red pullover, a newcomer, but a very well-known, always smiling face of the industry, Berggren. With the red handkerchief, the tall Viking, president of NEP Europe, Palsson. In the middle, the big red R with the red shoes, the one and only Riedel. Next to him, the proof that there are new talents on the block, new players on the block, Redfern from EVS, the CTO of EVS. Klaus, the man behind all the colorful pictures of all the Grass Valley cameras in the world. And last but not least, Antti Laurila, our strategic officer. We call him Antti Santa Claus Laurila. And it is an honor for me to introduce our host and colleague from me. We worked together on OB vans in the 90s. One of the best technicians I ever met, with a wide view beyond the horizon of our industry. Ronald Meyvisch. Ronald will introduce the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. So, cloud production. There was a lot about cloud production in the previous panel. Until a few years, cloud was like a buzzword. It was used for everything. It has now been replaced by metaverse, or metaverse, like we say in Germany. But still, cloud, centralized production, it's the topic of this panel. But are they actually the same thing? For example, in Holland, NEP, they use quite traditional infrastructure, centralized, and they call it a private cloud. So maybe first to Krista, what is for you the main differentiator between something centralized, cloud, or is it all just remote production?
First of all, it's not just in Netherlands. If you talk private cloud, we have private cloud every day. I am not the biggest cloud supporter in this room. I think Moritz was on stage before, tried to teach me a little bit, and he's probably one of the smartest guys regarding clouds. But I would say the easiest way for us is anyway to centralize. We see centralized production if we use the cloud to do parts of it, or if we do fiber, it doesn't really matter. I think so, that's what we need to say. As long as we don't do any processes in the cloud, I don't call it cloud production either.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Thomas, for you, would that mean that as a manufacturer from equipment and solutions, going to cloud or to centralized, does it mean that as a company you have to work on two axes of where you want to actually develop your technology? Or is it the same actually to develop for them?
Well, for me, it's the same. First of all, if we talk cloud, it's not about something in the sky. And sometimes, I mean, it's so obvious, but you have to state that anyway. There's still equipment somewhere, is hardware in racks.
Yeah.
And whether this is, hardware with AWS as like a large provider, or it's like in my cellar, and it's my private rack and I have a computer in, at the end of the day, it's exactly the same. There's certainly a difference whether the software process runs on COTS equipment or it runs in an FPGA. There is differences there. But in a way, it's all very similar. So for us as a manufacturer, it's more about we develop processes in software, and they need to run on a certain hardware, whether that hardware is also supplied by us or the hardware is an existing computer supplied by our client or it's coming from a telco provider, it doesn't really matter. I think that the discussion is put upside down. And there should be much more the discussion about what do we really want to achieve and what do we want to do, and then find the right method and the right tool. I mean, if I build a house, I don't start with the tools, I start with the planning, and then I look at what house do I want to build, and then I just choose the right tool for it. So that's my personal difficulty with that overall discussion.
Okay. If I go to Antti as a system integrator, in the previous panel we heard that going cloud or on-prem is largely depending on the content. Would you, as a system integrator, advise your customers in the same way, or would there be other reasons why you would say don't go to the cloud or don't go?
Well, I would continue what Christer and Thomas has said, that okay, first we need to listen our customers, what they really want to achieve. And then we are choosing, like in, let's say, traditional system integration, what are the best tools to achieve what you want to do? And that's defined that whether we use on-prem or on-cloud components.
Question for Alex. Peter made a comment in the previous panel. We should have more than one cloud provider. It's mainly AWS. Do you see a role like for EVS to say we start building our own data center, we start making a typical data center cloud just for the media industry as a competitor to Amazon?
It's a good question. I think it almost comes back to business models sometimes. If you want to offer something in SaaS, you shouldn't really care where it runs. So some of our SaaS offerings run in private cloud, some run in public cloud, some run on hardware. And it sort of comes back to, more, like I say, more driven by the business model than actually where you want to run. So would we as a vendor want to go up against Amazon? No, we'd lose. I think we all would around the table. But could we offer services to the broadcast industry that might run anywhere transparently? Yeah, absolutely, we could do.
Because on the last Olympics there was this test, I think it was together with Intel, where they said, okay, we are doing production like it is cloud-based, but it's actually with infrastructure in place, which could be edge cloud or an extension of a data center. Is that something that you see Amazon going to build a temporary data center, or would you say, no, that's the role of a service provider, or that's the role of a manufacturer?
I think in that case it was the service provider, if I remember well. But the COTS, I mean, it was COTS. It wasn't really cloud. It was a COTS deployment. Was defined by the rights owner because of various reasons, and we as a vendor were just asked to be compliant with that particular brand of COTS. And from a sort of a development perspective, when we're developing software, if we can run it in COTS, in theory, it will migrate to the cloud. It's always in theory, and maybe it needs less tweaks than going from FPGA to GPU, for example. Going from one brand of CPU to another is, in theory, far more simple than big uplifts. But that's a good example of something where we use the word cloud, but there was no connectivity. It was all on-prem in containers with bits of metal and CPUs and GPUs running in a container somewhere.
Okay. So maybe it's best to say, like, we have one way of producing with traditional equipment, and the other is what we call virtualized production, is software running on generic platforms.
Yeah.
And that can be in cloud or on-premise.
Yeah. And the key goal there was that to the operator, it was as transparent as possible. The operator shouldn't know whether there was an FPGA-based hardware box or a CPU-based COTS system, or ideally the next step would be fully running in the cloud. It should be transparent to the operator.
Okay. With the shift from baseband to IP, from dedicated hardware to software, dedicated machines or generic service, came also the promise that everything would become easier and cheaper, and we would have endless possibilities. Well, did it really become true? Because I was at the conference in London last year, and somebody stated, can we please have a router again that we can trust? So 2110, NDI, SRT, all very young technologies. But Matt, do you fully trust them?
Well, we actually decided to go for an SDI infrastructure, so I think the easy answer is no. But we chose SDI because it fitted our purpose pretty good. We needed something we could rely on, and that was easy to operate and well proven. So for us, it was an easy choice this time.
Yeah. So SDI doesn't mean you can't do anything as centralized production.
Well, we are operating in a centralized production facility in an SDI environment, but taking advantage of Mr. Riedel's products for getting a sort of networked infrastructure.
Klaus, do you think to make these new technologies like NDI, SRT, 2110, to make them more trustworthy, or to make them, should manufacturers work more together from your point of view?
Yes, we need, or we actually do that already, especially for 2110. We have the Blackfests once every year or even more often, and we always attend to them to get our equipment tested in an environment with other vendors, to make sure that they talk to each other the same language, or to even find out where we need to do things that they work correctly. And we are, as a manufacturer, very happy to work with other vendors, competitors, to find out that the interfacing between equipment is secured.
Thomas, you have now Simply Live in your house. That's fully software based. That's also IT. Does it fully answer the question of making things easier and cheaper?
Well, it's definitely one answer, I think. Generally speaking, I believe there is typically more than one answer to a question. And if you look at what we do for, many years, is we never said it's only about this or that. We always said it's about the right balance. So if you ask me about IP, whether I think it's good or bad, I would say it's can be good and it can be bad depending on the project. Same as with SDI. And the same is also with basically everything we do. We always try to integrate, if there is two sites, then we try to integrate both of the sites, and also make sure that you can, the fader in between should be in the hands of our clients. Because it's not like we can tell exactly how much of one thing is needed. It's again the story of the tools. We should have the full tool set, and we know that people who invest in our equipment, they have very, this is a big decision to put money in capex, and that should last for 10 or more years. And to do so, you need to be safe that the tool is as flexible as possible. So ideally, it's always like you can do either or. And that's what we do in all activities we do. Therefore, it's also the answer on the software end. Simply Live specifically is a step in another interesting direction. Don't beat me. And we like the challenge. That's
so do we.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I did when I started with Intercom many years ago. There were very big players around. We went our way, and I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah. So Simply Live started as an on-prem system. Is it easy to move that into the cloud, or would you today say we develop something like it's intended for the cloud and then make sure we can sell it on hardware that gets with it?
In fact, in this case, it does already. Fox Sports and ESPN in the US did heavy tests with Simply Live in the cloud, and they are about to move thousands of productions into that software solution and the deployment in AWS and other clouds. So basically, it does work, but you can at the same time just put it in the box like you see it here at the display in our booth, and just run it there, mount it in your rack, or put it in your own private data center. We don't care, because at the end of the day, it's always the same piece of software, and it can run in any version.
Okay. Now, with centralized and cloud production, there's another question on technology for Klaus. One of the most difficult things, or the point of failure, is the fact that you need to transport the camera signal back into the centralized facilities. As Peter told earlier, when it was a triax cable and it broke down, you could just replace it. Which solutions are there now available that you would say, or would become in the future available, to make sure this link becomes really reliable?
Yeah, the question is also, do you always have to bring all your signals in the highest quality into the cloud, or cannot you build a system where you leave your high bandwidth, high quality signals on-prem and do remote services through the cloud with proxies or lower bandwidth signals for the operation you want to do remote, like camera shading, like maybe replay operation and so on. And one of the challenges is bandwidth, because in terms of cameras, bandwidth is also means latency, or the relation between bandwidth and latency. You can transport high bandwidth signals easily through small pipes, but then you have a long latency. For many applications like camera shading, latency is a big issue. And even more, I think, in replay operation. I mean, even one frame is sometimes already an issue, and talking about half a second or so is an absolute no-go. So the challenge is the balance in between. So what we have already in our latest cameras is built-in compression solution based on JPEG XS. So we support 2110-22 streams from the camera straight into the IP network. So that already reduced the bandwidth requirements compared to uncompressed by factor 10, and still keep a really, really short latency. But still today, this is too much for most of cloud applications, especially when you want to go to UHD. So this is practically almost not possible today. So, but still the question is, why should you move all the signals in highest quality into the cloud? Why not keep them on-prem? So, but this is one of the challenges, let's say, available bandwidth versus the requirements we have in live productions, which means low latency.
And having SRT straight off the camera?
Yeah, well, for certain applications, it would be good to have a camera which directly gives SRT or NDI, but you also have to see for really demanding applications. Some of the standards will not provide the right solution, like NDI is a good example. It's an 8-bit system, which is okay for SDR, but as most in the industry agree, for HDR operation, you have to have 10 bits. So that's already then a limitation. So you have to be careful which format to use for which type of application. And of course, there's a large range of application from top class Olympics, Soccer World Cup, and maybe secondary league sports, where you can accept certain compromises.
Question for Christer and for Mats. Your life has become more complex, because before you could just dispatch an OB truck. Now everything is centralized. You have very complex installations to manage. Control systems are playing an important role there. Are they fully covering your needs, or is there something crucial missing? Who wants to
No. Today I can't say that they cover our needs to the full extent. There are always room for improvements, and even though I don't really agree that it's just employing an OB, life in the centralized facility is also really complex, and you need a control system that is able to handle a lot of different situations.
There is no system, and there was no system on the market to do that. And we found that out because we were probably one of the first one to go IP already down in Australia in 2019, building the hubs in Melbourne, Sydney, and all over Australia. And some from here and some from here, we tried to really build the control system to orchestral, all of that, and there was nobody can help us, so we built it ourselves. And So I would say, yes, there is a system, but we have built it ourselves, and we call it TFC. And of course, it's not ready, but it's, in my way, the biggest one on the market right now. It can orchestral quite many signals, and that was used on a big event in December in Middle East.
Mm-hmm. What does it stand for, TFC?
Mike, what is the official one? The official is...
Sorry, maybe I put the question back.
I can tell you the story why we have a TFC. Now there's an official name on it because the traffic, whatever, but is built by a guy, Dan Murphy, very smart guy, and Leander, super smart guys, built it in Australia. Dan, when he was young, he was really obsessed by a program, a cartoon.
Thomas the Tank.
Yeah. And in that one, there was the
fat controller.
The fat controller was sitting, connecting the trains coming from different waves with signal. So, yeah, so the work name was TFC, the fat controller. Yeah. Then we can't sell the fat controller, so we have changed it to something else. But TFC is the short, yeah. But that is, I have to say, we are not the product, like we haven't been a product builder and stuff, but we were forced to do that. We have done quite heavily investments to do that, and we have quite many people working with that, and now we have it in all our hubs. Zlatan, you will have it in the hubs in both Munich and Cologne, which is coming up and running end of Q2. Antti, we have it in Finland, where you have been doing that. We have it in OB vans all over the world soon. But it's also, that's IP. We have it for IP. Yeah. And of course, one of the plans to have that is that we can control the signals forever. And what we discussed before with the dream about the unified backend, wherever we have it, not in Thomas' basement, but somewhere else. That's the thing, so we can steer the signals with that one. So we need to have an orchestral tool to do that. And so far it's working. We use it for ourselves, so it's managed service from us, but we don't know. It's so far we are happy with it, at least.
Okay. We don't have it at TMC, but I do agree with Christer that it will play a very important role.
Yeah, because in the previous panel, one of the things when they were talking about centralized or cloud, that the world should actually be hybrid. How do you see that go then to a control system? Does it need to be connected to Amazon? Look at how my instances are going, maybe control them, maybe configure them, fire them up? Or would you say, no, the control system doesn't need to link to that?
Well, maybe I can take a place here. Yeah. So we have a control system, and that is used by one side, and it's called HI, human interface. So we took a little bit, we had the same dilemma as Christer told. So we have a lot of projects where we are act as a system integrator. So we see that there is a problem. There is no proper control system on the market that fulfills our needs. So then we face this and invent our own control system. And we started from easy configuration usability point of view for the users, that you don't need to send expensive specified user around the world to do the configuration, that anyone can do it. And that was the approach of HI, human interface, so which tells us in the name that, okay, we have it human approach, usable GUI. That's how we did, and it was meant to be for the IP world. So we built the data model based on IP, but then we witnessed that, okay, there are so many SDI implementations around that we need to support SDI. So the same data model is used. So now in terms hybrid, we have a hybrid. We can use it in SDI, we can use the same control system in IP. So it's kind of bridging these two new worlds, and because it's so virtualized, you can even put it in the Amazon or our plans to make it, for example, the Grass Valley app in the future. So,
I just need to say we have Hive system too, we have Under system, and we have ESM system. So we have all systems. So if it's public radio, so we say there's a lot of systems, so we have them all.
From a React, it's quite interesting when we talk about control systems, as in routing controls, moving signal flows around. But I think there's an aspect that a lot of control systems don't handle yet, which will be more important in the cloud, which is actually resource allocation alongside the routing. And that's something that from one of our projects we highlighted that our system, Cerebrum, just to get the plugin, it doesn't have. And so we have the routing, and we're quite good at that. You know, in IP and SDI, we support hundreds of endpoints, whatever. But actually the idea of spinning resources up and down or segmenting existing resources to say, I want to use half of this resource for Studio A and half of this for the other. The idea of resource allocation becomes more important, especially in centralized production, where you want to get the most out of your facilities. And then in cloud, linked to that, I want to spin something up dynamically. I want it to register in my routing, in my control system, and I want to be able to route signals to it and flows to it, whatever that might be. That's where routing and control systems at the moment are young, I would say. It's not non-existent, but they're young.
We do some tests.
Oh, so do we.
Thomas, is there anything that could be further improved to make it easier to link venues to centralized production centers in a way like, okay, is it the control system? Is it the operation of the network? Is there anything that could be done better? Because we still hear like centralized production is fine, but linking the stadium to the production facility is still complex.
Well, I don't think so. When it comes to just the connectivity part, because that is an easy thing. It's typically point to point, and in my mind, that part can be also interfaced on the IP end as well as on the SDI end, as Matt said earlier. I think the overall challenge is really the overall orchestration, and the complexity is getting more and more. And that's something, whether you look in the audio field, in the video field, doesn't matter. But all the interfaces we know from the 90s are still there. And we have always added. We have added interfaces, and just the variety of interfaces is getting more. The complexity is getting up. And at the same time, we have challenges finding people. So the pure logic out of that is like, if the systems are not getting easier in handling, this will crash, because it's just a very simple logic. So from that point of view, the goal of all of us as manufacturers need to be to keep things simpler. And if we take our phones, like an iPhone or whatever smartphone, this is a hugely complex device. But the way we use that is really like we switch it on. We typically don't even need a manual, and we just get going. And this is the level of ease of use we need in our industry as well. And this probably, if I talk about my company, it's the number one task we're working on. I think in the and we can't do that in just one heap over the whole portfolio. But if you just look at how we address the wireless intercom field, and probably it's a known that product we have now for 5 years is a real success. And if people ask, what is the success in that? It is exactly the ease of use, the ease of setting a system up and how to make it work. And our goal is to expand that and to have that ease of use across all our products. And I mean, part of the truth is we're not there, but that's what we're working on step by step. And I think that's also the race we are in when we look at how are the other manufacturers doing. So a discussion about IP or SDI, a discussion about cloud or on-prem, this is not my headache. My headache really is how do we get it simple? And this is our main task.
I think it's capturing the idea as well. We talk about skill set, like in our R&D team, we develop a lot in C++, for example. It's not hard to find C++ developers to write the code. What's hard is that translation of the user need, like you say, what the user actually wants to do in the context of a broadcast live TV production, and translate that to someone that can write the code. And that's where we struggle, I think, is in the I guess it's product management ultimately, but that's the skill set that I think we're lacking as an industry, is that translation from user experience, what the user needs, to the actual software developers.
One of the hot things on CES was new term they're using now, or to me it was new, device experience. It's what is the user actually, what's his experience with a certain device when he's using it? Is it like it's easy, or does he want to throw it away? That sort of things. I hear also balanced computing. That's one of the things you like to talk about, Alex, because is it right to say that EVS is still often perceived as the guys with the blue boxes, the hardware servers, not going into the cloud? And then you come with balanced computing. But what is it?
Well, yeah, we are perceived as the guys that do the replays, and that is obviously true. It doesn't represent, it represents quite a relatively small or a surprisingly small portion of our business, and we do a lot that goes around that. And in terms of development, hardware development at EVS is only about 25% of our development capacity. The rest is software, and the software that we make is microservices based. It's on its way to being microservices based, so it can be deployed anywhere. And what we found is that the idea of deploying the hardware in the right place, like in the truck or in the broadcast center, and the software wherever it needs to be. So we saw an uptake just before COVID of people in trucks putting hypervisors and just running our software in VMs just to save rack capacity and rack space in trucks. And from there, we just start to see it being deployed in the cloud. You know, like asset management software is just software, and you can run it on a VM, whether if it's 15 years old, you can just spin up a Windows VM and run it in the cloud. Now, that's not cloud native. We can talk about the difference between cloud native and sort of, I don't want to go there particularly. But it's interesting. Balance for us is just about running the right thing in the right place. So a big initiative from IBC, we talked about the value of the cameras coming back might be different. We recognize that from things like onboard cameras in motorsports. On an EVS, there's 12 odd channels of record. If you have 5 or 6 EVSs on the trucks out there, but in NASCAR, for example, there's 40 cars on the track and each one has 2 or 3 cameras. That's a lot of cameras. Sometimes 4 cameras per car. That's a lot of cameras that are all coming as SRT feeds that you want to give to your EVS operators, because it might give you the content that wins you the Emmy. That's what they say in the US. That camera might win me the Emmy. So you want the content to be recorded and accessible by the operator instantly, but do you want to put 50 EVSs? We want you to do that, but we understand that you might not want to. So that's why we look to balance and like putting record channels in the cloud, but linking them to the servers on the truck and things like that. It's about deploying the right thing in the right place.
Okay, so when I hear from this question for you, Klaus, that there's more effort now in developing software than hardware, maybe it's a little bit unrespectful to say that your new cameras or a computer with a sensor and a lens on it. Is it also that for camera development you're focusing more on the software part now than on the actual image capturing part?
Yeah, for many years already, basically, the camera internally is basically like a computer. So it processing data. So, and in our cameras for years already, everything is running on FPGA codes. So there are no hardware processors dedicated for the camera. So, and in our latest camera, we do native IP, what we call, so that the camera provides 2110 streams from the camera head into the network. The cameras can subscribe to 2110 streams from the network for return video and teleprompter and other applications. The camera does the PTP locking and everything. So the camera really performs like a large computer. So from a development perspective, already for years, we have more software developers and firmware developers as we have hardware developers. Of course, still an imager is a piece of hardware which we develop in-house. So we have a small team of image experts. We have a small team of processing experts. But at the end, most of the work is software control, software processing, and FPGA codes. So, and since this is already today in FPGA code, theoretically, the same function can run somewhere else. So if we would provide raw data from the camera into the network, wherever it is, the processing could be done somewhere else. Today, it does not make much sense yet, but on the other hand, one could think of, today we produce HDR, SDR straight from the camera. We provide 2 streams into the network. And then one could ask, well, if you do this inside a camera, why not provide just one stream and do the conversion somewhere else downstream?
Yeah.
If it's on-prem or in the cloud, it could be one or the other. So, yeah, as I said, so more and more software is in the camera, more and more software development is required, but we have that already for a year. That was not a change from one year to the next. It's a process. It's ongoing.
So when we're going to centralized production, cloud production, it's more and more about software tools that need to be interconnected. Typically, a system integrator used to draw schematics and do cabling between machines. Now, with going to cloud and more software defined, how do you see the role of a system integrator to actually connect all those things and make them work together? Is it your role? Is it the role of a service provider or of the manufacturer?
That's a good question, and I think it's our role. So we are still there in the middle. So in a traditional way, we were drawing the schematics and pulling the cables. Now we are looking, if we think about the cloud-based production or the virtualized environment, so then it's a different kind of applications that need to interact within each other. And in the same way, we are looking at what are these best applications for our customers, that what they need to fulfill their job, and then how they interact, what is the workflow, how we build that, and then we need to start there and be as a kind of trusted advisors to tell our customers that this is the way to go.
Am I right in saying that for a service provider, you think it's your task to create workflows for your customers?
I think you have done one thing there, and you do it with Broadcast Solution, your system integrator. We have right now 3 projects up and running. 2 of them involve Broadcast Solution. One of them, your Germany, shall we call them system integrator? Yes. Finland, you are more hybrid. And then we have one in Sweden, which we don't have them inside at all. So, but I see that they have a position, yes. And the knowledge, but then also everybody, I think everybody here, we have, during the new type of, we do a system change a little bit, and we are not crawling around, we're walking a little bit, but we are not really running, at least. I know Alex and me, we had a very good experience in December, where there was from 0 to 1000% in an IP project. We learned a lot.
Well, we talked about the JT&M tests earlier, and the products that we used there passed all the JT&M tests. So in terms of interop, it all should have worked. And then we got there, and it just didn't. Whether it's the products, the infrastructure, it's hard to say sort of what it is, but everyone's understanding of the standard was different. And that's it, ultimately. And, the idea of a red-blue network versus a purple network, where the PTP was distributed from, all of that caught us out. But we all passed the JT&M test. We all got our stickers and said, hey, we passed. We interop with everyone happily. And then the reality is, what was the statistic earlier? It's 4 times longer to commission an IPOB truck or something. Yeah. You asked earlier, should we trust it? Yeah, we should. But we should trust it at the end of the commissioning.
There's a real culture clash. We have that internally too, because we say, the IT people, the lovely IT people, they do everything, and we do that, and the deadline is a deadline, but the deadline, 5 minutes, you have it here. Yeah, but it's not working. Yeah, but that's a bug fix. We can't do bug fix in TV. There's a deadline. 8 o'clock, the show starts. Okay, well, we need to do a bug fix. Okay, it's not working, but it's coming in 5 minutes. There's the thing. We do the merge from the fantastic IT world to the old traditional broadcast world, and it will take a while. And then we're coming with products. All of these fantastic smart companies, they're coming with products. We test them in one environment. Then we come into environment when how many signals did we have? The Grass Valley mixers in there was 48 12G channels coming into, 60 with the graphic, and 60 12G channels coming into VIP of course, there might be a processing, a little bit buffer, because it's an IP stream. We don't know. We didn't see that when we tested, but suddenly live. And the shading part, yes, that 3 frames. Yeah, you see that in the beginning.
Yeah.
Tom, where are you? Yeah. Yeah. So we didn't see. There's a lot of learnings. We need to be a little bit calm down a little bit.
Should we push a little bit more pressure to the standardization and interoperability? So I mean that coming now for Christer, you and Mats as an end customer, that we as a system integrator are many times in a project, and as you Alex said that you have tested, you all have got the stamp, and then we are putting all these things together in big system, TV station or whatever, and then we face the interoperability problems because everyone has a different interpretation of the standards. So should we put? I come from telecom industry, and I have worked with standards in 3GPP, where actually the whole success of from NMT to GSM, and you don't need different phones when you go to US and Europe and Japan. So it was achieved when the manufacturers worked together and built standards that is kind of clear, and everyone can know that it works in a way. So I'm a little bit challenging now manufacturers that I know you are trying, but are you trying enough?
I think SDI is a nice standard.
Okay.
Mic drop.
The thing is, but that's the thing with the handshake thing with IP. We know that can be some issues to do the handshake, because when you connect to that, you do the handshake, and there's so many different suppliers inside, and we have learned the hard way during tests and do those things. So yes, it would be fantastic to have one standard, but nobody will do it anyway.
Well, when you compare the telco IT industry to our industry, then I think you ignore that industry is multiple times bigger.
Yeah.
And because of that, they can build the standards, because building standards means finding common sense. And finding common sense is, by the way, that's the same challenge we have in democracy, right? And we all know how hard it is. And there's very good reasons how to have democracy in a country. But if I think, do I want to have democracy in my company? I'm not sure about that. So if I break this down now and say there's certain projects where I personally wouldn't do that complexity, and I wouldn't even think of like all these standard topics, because I would just go for a solution which works. And I just listen to the applause on the SDI, because there is so many projects where I just say, well, go for what's there, what's plug and play and works. And then there's other projects. If I say I have a whole campus television station with several buildings, I don't know, a huge one, then, well, SDI probably isn't the right solution for that anymore. And that is something where you also have the budgets and you have the experts to run the more complex system. And that's where I see the division between these things.
I understand the point, Thomas.
Yeah.
But then in the end, actually, this is in some level good for us, because then we as a system integrator are needed to connect all the different kind of devices together and build a working solution. This is our job. So this we are coming in a place.
It's a bit cliche, but it's a bit like MXF back 15, 20 years ago. You know, our MXFs didn't work with Avid, and then we had to do some work, and Avid did some work, and then they didn't work with Final Cut, and then they didn't work and they just all work now. And I really feel that will happen with IP, and that every big project we go through, you, whoever goes through, there's a learning. And as long as we all learn from it, and as long as we all get that feedback, then we won't make the same mistakes again.
Okay. So if it's all software-based, US manufacturers provide the APIs, the SDKs, and then you take the full ownership if it's not working? Or who's going to do that?
Well,
we're waiting.
This has been the case. So luckily we have trustful partners and we work together. So in the end to achieve the working solution. So it's not always the easy journey. So, but then we need to have a partnership. And I think this was already what Peter was saying in the first panel, that actually the model is more like the partnership model when we are trying the new things. So it involves all of us. So it's not like that we go together. We understand that there are some failures, but we learn from that, and then we are not repeating, and then we need to fix it and make the system work.
From my side, I can say I think it was the ownership with the SDA, make the SDA great again, is much easier, because now to do a big IP project, it's very hard to get somebody taking ownership. We had a discussion with several. That's because, and I understand 100%, because it is about different standards going in, and nobody really know what's happening.
IT and IP are very different. IP real-time video, I think we should have standards and MOS and 2110. IT in terms of like software integration with APIs, I think that's totally different to me, because there I think you need someone in charge, whether it's a systems integrator or a lead vendor who is responsible, because we've all got APIs. We can all say, here's our API, but you're not going to take our API and we're not going to take yours. Someone's going to probably need to bring them together, probably. And either one of us needs to be the hierarchical sort of, we are the overarching software and we will take your APIs, or it's your job to make the software glue that links all the APIs together.
That's where, as a service provider, you want to add value, or do you intend to become a service provider yourself?
Well, we are by definition system integrator, but now let's say in some cases it means that we have like with Crash Valley AMP here. So we have a whole production capability. So this is usually used as a POCs, but there can be a case where the customer is buying that for one event, and then we are providing that. But we are not intended to become like any B or DMC or any production company. So this is not that kind of service provider. We provide technical services and not the production people.
Okay, I'm looking at the clock, but I still have an interesting question. It's a bit about sustainability, which is a hot topic, especially at the CES. It was also one of the main things. Now, when sustainability is discussed in broadcast, we often narrow it immediately down to carbon emissions, while it's actually about the environment, it's about social, it's about governance. Have you seen any impact both on service provider side or on the manufacturer on the social life or on the social aspect of sustainability due to the fact that it's becoming more centralized or more cloud-based? Production infrastructure, or do you say no, we purely focus on carbon emissions? Somebody earlier said it's about work-life balance that is changing.
I can say that we started doing remote production with a US broadcaster in 2016, so way before COVID, and they took 4 EVS operators and kept them at home rather than flying them all over the place. And the work-life balance increased dramatically. I think Peter talked about 2 games per day, and they could do similar. They could do like, rather than a freelance operator was doing 1, maybe 2 games per week, they were capable of doing 5, maybe 6 games per week. And what the broadcaster said was that the work-life balance increased. There was a positive impact on the environment. They were saving money on travel. They weren't flying people around, so there was a positive environmental impact. But the social impact on the operators was really high because they had a much better work-life balance. Not only that, those operators became better operators much quicker because they did more productions in a shorter space of time. And when they had the big OBs, the big sort of productions that they wanted operators for, they would then fly those operators to the OBs for the end of season big game. Guess which one it was. They would fly those operators there because they were the best operators, and they progressed quicker. They got better. They had more skills, and they could also be more versatile as well because they might do other jobs within the building. Whereas a freelance EVS operator is normally a freelance EVS operator, and that's what they do. So it was it had environmental impacts. The other thing that, because those operators got better, the quality of the production, the standard of the production increased dramatically. And that was something that they didn't plan. They just wanted to save a bit of money on hotels and flights. And all of those things were a knock-on effect of that, basically.
Exactly what we have seen in Australia when we started Earliest. Yeah. Exactly those things.
Yeah,
and honestly, with the situation now with people and how hard it is to get to people, we need to try to do that more and more. And we need to...
But you see that sustainability is not really the driver. And that's the interesting one, because still cost is the driver.
Yeah, of course.
Or resources. You know, if people are not available anymore, then you need to do something. You know, and typically remote production is done at the end to save cost. And there's as an additional effect, well, you have less flights, and then that's more a greenwashing story making thing, and you tick a box.
Yeah.
Which I feel is a problem because, and not a problem of our industry, but a general problem because we all don't take the topic of sustainability in terms of like climate change and such. We don't take this seriously. And privately, I'm very pessimistic, and I believe that in 200 years' time, there's no human beings anymore. And unfortunately, people here in the room and people in Germany, people in Europe, don't even have the critical influence because the influence are with some other nations, which are some more people. And but we can still do something. And in my mind, we need to become more serious in the topic. I mean, I remember that when I built my first intercom system, one of the features of that system was that our system took less energy, so had less power draw than any other system in the market. And that was something we really did on purpose at that time. And no one was interested in that. People were only interested in the cost and the feature set. That's it. And to be honest, I still don't buy it when people say, well, we do remote production for sustainability purposes. I think they still look at cost.
Yeah. No, but there's a big difference. There's a huge difference. If we go with UK have this topic. Alex, you know that too. In every RFP, it's really, really strict. What to do or not what allowed or whatever and goals, and then it's for real. It's coming in some here, but not at the same level.
You wanted to comment?
Yeah, I wanted just to comment on one of the previous discussion about the change of the way how the people works from going on the venue side or staying at home or at a home base and working. And it reminds me to a discussion I had once with Arte Granberg, who is now the CTO of Swedish Television, and that's more than 10 years ago. We had a customer event in Sweden, and I was interviewing him about their findings on remote productions, as I said, more than 10 years ago. It was really the early days. And he said, at one point of time, I came to the office and people came to me and was really fighting and shouting to me that I killed their work environment, that they cannot travel anymore and they hate him for this one. And there was really, really negative about him, that they had to stay at home and could not travel to the event anymore. And he said, it was just a few months later, one of the guys came back to him and said, Arte, thank you very much that you did the changes. Now I became father and I now can enjoy to be much closer to my child. And if I would need to travel like before, it would be a nightmare. And now I have a complete... And this was more than 10 years ago when the word work-life balance was even, I think, not created. At least I have not heard it in that time. So it's also a process. People start to think differently, where, as I said, 10 years ago, it was a real offense to somebody telling him, you are not allowed to travel anymore, you have to stay. And now they appreciate. And as an industry, and I totally agree with you, Thomas, I think if we not all do all what we can do, to reduce the carbon footprint and all the other stuff, power consumption and so on, then, yeah, at the end, human being will not exist. And there are many, many things, areas where we can improve things. I mean, there could also be an argument, do we still the big trade shows we have every year where people fly around the world, or can't we do that more with remote sessions, local events and so on? So there are many, many areas where we can improve. But coming back to the topic of remote production, yes, in many cases we can reduce power consumption and things like that, going remote, working in the cloud. still there are room for improvements over there. So means the compute power we need is still not optimized. There are many rooms for improvements. And I think we as manufacturers have to work on that one. Hopefully we will find the right balance between the different requirements.
Yeah. Are we calculating it in the right way? Because I think that's crystal when you have to answer an RFP, as Thomas already said, sustainability is an item there. But how do you answer that, and how do you prove that you're sustainable? Do you go back as far as tracing where your cameras were produced and if it was correct?
It is a tricky question, of course, and it's really hard to calculate. I think we have tried to do what we can in reducing our carbon footprint, at least. We have a complete broadcast center with 17 production areas, and we consume a little more than 10 kilowatts, which is a really lean production, so to say. Yeah. And we try to be conscious about it. And in Sweden we have Greta, so we take that pretty serious, of course. But it's a difficult question to answer and or to be precise on the answer.
And we have the same as we have a competitive policy, and we have the same goals for 2030. We will be neutral, and of course it's not by planting trees all around. It's by doing things. But going back, I don't call Klaus and ask how much green points do I build this camera, and especially not if they do something in India or China, which quite much of the cards are done inside. So we do our best. We are investing in solar panels in our broadcast centers, which we own. We do that and try to use. But some parts is to check the list, like you said, Thomas. But we also. But the good thing is, when we talk about it and we discuss it, then we see the people in our companies. You see change, because you see suddenly after half a discussion, then you see change. You don't see the pet bottles anymore. You see different recycling things. So the mindset is helping us. So I think that's the best thing so far with it, that we changed the mindset.
Okay, let's see if we have some questions from the audience. If anybody has a question, please raise your hand.
Oh, quick one. I have a lot of them, but quick one. So we have manufacturers sitting here, we have an integrator sitting here, and we have a facility company sitting here. You're making your own software because it's not available. You're making your own software because it's not available. What are we going to? You're gonna commercialize this software? Are you becoming a manufacturer? Like,
I can start there. On a paper product, and if you as like the world is like it is, and there's somebody invested money, and if you can, Alex is fantastic. You have mentioned all the buzzwords today. You mentioned cloud, and then you have SaaS. So yeah, if there's a multiple, every company have a multiple when they sell. If you can check those boxes, then you get a higher price. But then to be a product company, Thomas and I have discussed it quite much. To make a product will take from start to maybe a goal is 4 years. There's a lot of hits on it. There's a bumpy road, but you need to keep driving. You need to have an R&D department. You have a lot. We don't have that. So no.
But that's only part of the answer.
Yes.
Because I believe we can't draw the traditional lines anymore. And that is something. I mean, I'm faced with that for the last, how long am I running that business? 36 years, and I'm kind of for the whole time being blamed for being a service provider with my rental radios I started with, and over the years I did more services. And so the same people who buy my products also sometimes complain about the fact that I also do services. But the point is, there is no clear lines. People also come and say, well, we want to have, software as a service. And they come to you. And it's, by the way, exactly the same people who complain about me doing service, ask me about, well, can you offer me your product as a software as a service? I said, wait a minute, what do you want now? But what I wanted to tell is that, the world is not black and white, and we all are forced to develop our companies. So Broadcast Solutions has to develop themselves, and Grass Valley, EVS, and Riedel have, but as well as NEP or DMC. We all have to do that, and therefore, I think we will cross certain lines where I feel there is no lines really. But we will touch each other. But the more important question, whether who stays in which camp and stay where you are and don't move, the much better one is, well, please let's talk. Because as long as you talk, you find ways of, like, we're doing this, you're doing that. Let's make sure we're doing not the same thing. We cooperate, and this is the answer to that. So everyone who has an issue with us growing and moving in different fields, I always say, well, come to us and let's discuss. We are super happy to discuss, and I'm sure we find solutions, because at the end of the day, we all have the same resource issues. There's less people in our industry. I mean, just today, one person told me that the average age of cameramen in German Bundesliga is 58 years. Someone else said to me that, did you know that in ZDF, within the next 4 years, 30% of all people will retire? Just take these two things. Well, you will see that we have an issue. If we count the average age in this room, I bet it is beyond 50. I'm 55, so I'm already way beyond that. So we have a huge problem. And at the end of the day, there is enough room for everyone, and there's not enough people coming to our industry anyway. So let's just get together, find solutions, and then there's enough business and challenges out there to tackle. And that is my answer to that question.
Any other questions? Let's see a question over there.
So thank you, Thomas. I'm one of the younger people below the 50, to be honest. But no, what I heard is the user friendliness is as a main point is quite obvious. But I don't see. I see 5 system controllers, to be honest, at this point. I see NAP, I see MediaWorks, EVS, Grass Valley as Zone, and also High Vision. Maybe standardize that development into one as a consortium, because maybe also make the user experience normalized between vendors, like it's an internet application. Because I believe in that to make it future-proof, to gain youngsters again inside the broadcast sector. Because I also see a lot of my students from 12 years ago now who have left the business because the stress, because each product has its own user interface and every engineer needs to adopt, I think, 10, 15 services, software bases, and that's not reasonable. So the question is, when are you going to normalize the user interface?
Or is the business just going to consolidate and you become one company? Could also solve the issue.
Yeah, that's one, of course, of the challenges. We are competitors to each other, and we are not great friends, even though we work sometimes very close to each other. But each of us has direct competitors, and one of the differentiator is the human interface and how it interacts and so on. What we, from a manufacturer perspective, try to do is work close with our main customers, and NEP, of course, is one of them. Also, your company is one of them, and especially NEP is, of course, a long-term great customers of us. Actually, maybe the largest even in Europe. And we have a very good interaction talking about requirements. You mentioned Dan Murphy. I invited him lately to the camera factory. We had a very nice session exchanging their ideas, their requirements, where they see where we could improve our software interfacing. So we worked on that one, and I think we already provided solutions to them. So there is an interaction between, in this case, users and we as a supplier. But of course, and of course we work close with system integrators. Also, Broadcast Solutions is one of our best partners in that aspect. And by the way, also, I mean, we have good relationship, I think, to Riedel, where we need each other in terms of, in this case, mainly interfacing and so on, and wireless is one of the things. But at the end, I think there will not be one platform. Our AMP is one of the solutions, and hopefully the whole industry is going to AMP. That would be great. And I think we are a big player in that area, but it's kind of unrealistic to believe at one day that there is only one vendor.
And that doesn't also happen in other industries.
Yeah.
I mean, try to ask Apple and Microsoft to merge to one platform. This will not happen. So, and competition is also good because it's also driving innovations, because the fact that we are competitors is driving us, because we want to be better than you are, and you want to be better than we are. And that is good because that's in everybody's interest. And I kind of don't get the point that the students leave the industry because there is so many different interfaces. I mean, to me, and maybe I'm a bit blonde on that, but isn't that a little bit laziness that they don't want to really deal with the things? I mean, if I look at how much, when I was young, I worked in the industry and all the weekends and through the nights in really running these shows, what I see is that the younger generation now, they are simply not willing to work that hard anymore. And I see this is a problem when we can't solve that. But this is much more an overall challenge we have. And again, it's not related to this. But, you know, the panel here feels a little bit like World Economic Forum anyway. So, so therefore, we might talk about those things. But again, I believe this will not get together. We will fight for Riedel doing that overall interface, as well as I'm sure you guys will do the same, right? And we will see who wins.
But on the other hand, Thomas, if you want to make life easier and simple for us, you should cooperate.
Yeah, or we buy the guys. That's maybe.
Okay.
Maybe the replay is the best example. It's like everybody now has his own replay system, but the box to control it all look quite similar nowadays. And maybe that's also the way to go at it. Like the control system, it is different, but
it's the same in NLEs. Avid and Adobe are quite similar. Simply Live and EVS are quite similar. Yeah. Everything is quite similar. And like, I think it's like you say, it's how much you're willing to learn 2 systems or to learn 3 systems, and it probably gives you more value on the market as like an EVS, a replay operator, as we were corrected earlier, to know multiple systems. You're more valuable as an operator if you can turn up and operate, whether it's A or B or C. You know,
if the job is done right, it's driven by the operator and the users. So in the end, it should all look rather similar.
Yeah, there's certain things you cannot change. Like a piano always have the same order of the buttons. And like the EVS controller is a little bit like the piano. So you maybe can make it wider or a little slimmer, but you should not change the order to it. So there are certain things which have to be standardized, and there are others. A piano don't look like a guitar, and a guitar doesn't look like a trumpet. So there are differences, but all trumpets, again, more or less look the same for a good reason. No?
Yeah.
I could argue that now because there is other user interfaces which make the same sound as a piano.
Yeah.
But again, maybe we should go there now.
Any other questions? If not, then I'd like to thank this panel for what was an animated debate. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
A pleasure.